It's wonderful to see you all this morning. I want to add my welcome to you, especially if you're guests with us today. We're so glad that you're worshiping with us on this Palm Sunday, the last Sunday in the season of Lent. We are, of course, in this prayer of St. Francis, or the Peace Prayer, as it's also known. We've been looking at it throughout this season, meditating on it, using it in our daily devotions, in our worship services as well. And today we're focusing on a phrase that in some ways sums up the rest of the prayer. And that is, where there is darkness, let me sow light. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. And I say that it sums up the rest of the prayer because if you think about it, all of those other aspects, all those other places that it describes and situations where we are to bring something good to them can be summed up with darkness. Whether it's hatred or injury, whatever other aspects that we are praying to be instruments of peace in those situations, you could sum them up with that one word, darkness. So we're called to sow seeds of light wherever there is darkness. Someone gave me this this little piece that someone wrote about. It's one of those, how many does it take to change a light bulb? You know those jokes? So this one is about how many it takes of various denominations and Christian persuasions to change a light bulb. You may have seen it. But since we're talking about dispelling darkness, I thought I might share some of this with you. How many Calvinists does it take to change a light bulb? None. God has predestined when the lights will come on. How many Pentecostals does it take to change a light bulb? It takes 10. 1 to change it and 9 others to pray against the spirit of darkness. How many television evangelists does it take? 1. But for the light to continue to shine, send in your donation today. How many Episcopalians does it take to change a light bulb? 8. 1 to call the electrician, and 7 to say how much they liked the old light bulb better. How many fundamentalists does it take to change a light bulb? The Bible does not say anything about light bulbs. It's almost over, I promise. How many Roman Catholics? None. Candles only. How many Unitarians does it take to change a light bulb? Answer, we choose not to make a statement either in favor of or against the need for a light bulb. However, if in your own journey you have found that light bulbs work for you, that's fine. You're invited to write a poem or compose a modern dance about your personal relationship with your light bulb and present it next month at the annual Light Bulb Sunday service, in which we will explore a number of light bulb traditions, including incandescent, fluorescent, three-way, long life, and tinted, all of which are equally valid paths to luminescence. And United Methodists are not spared either. How many United Methodists does it take to change a light bulb? At least 15. 1 to change the light bulb, and 3 committees to approve the change, and another committee to decide who brings the potato salad. Yep. Yeah, that's us. Whoever wrote that, I think, wanted to make a point. And the point is very much, in a very lighthearted way, what Isaiah was saying to the people who had just returned from exile. And they had the right beliefs, and they practiced the fasts that they were supposed to practice, and made the sacrifices they were supposed to make, and they worshiped as they were supposed to worship. They did all those things. They probably had committees too, maybe covered dish dinners along the way. But it was a tough and difficult time, and in spite of doing all those things, they had fallen into a kind of dog-eat-dog existence. That is, every man for himself. It's a tough time. You got to look out for number one. And you can read between the lines and see that the people had kind of fallen into this. And so the word of the Lord comes to Isaiah and says, shout. Calls Isaiah to shout out. In the passage just before what we heard a moment ago, there are these words. Shout out, do not hold back, he says. And then he says, announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, they say, and you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down with the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? And then it picks up our reading today. Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. And then Isaiah does something that we don't often talk about, really. We use the word unconditional a lot, don't we? The unconditional love of God. It's a beautiful word. The unconditional love to which Christ calls us. It is a beautiful word. It's a word that encompasses grace. But here, it's conditional. It's if-then statements that are directed at the people in order that they would be those who bring light to darkness. If-then statements. Directed to the people of that time and that place, but friends, also directed to us as well. Very much in the spirit of Christ, who entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday as a different kind of king, to usher in a different kind of kingdom, a kingdom of light. And Jesus said to his followers, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine so that others will see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is darkness, let us sow light. So Isaiah is describing this as a conditional if-then statement. I said it's directed to us, and it is because we live in a world where there is a lot of darkness. We live in a world where there are lots of needs, where we need to be instruments of peace. And where there is injury, we need to be those who can sow seeds of pardon. And where there is hate, we can sow seeds of love. Where there is need and want, we can reach out in, as we say, concern and service to all the world. We live in a world where that is in strife. We live in a world where there are refugees fleeing terrible situations and are without homes. We know darkness is all around our globe, and darkness is right here in our nation as well. 14.5% of our citizens in this, the wealthiest nation in the world, do not know whether they will have a meal at the next mealtime. They don't have food security. 500,000, more than 500,000 people last night slept outside because they had no home. Many of them children. We know what darkness is, and we know that darkness cries out to us for the light. So listen to these if-then statements of Isaiah. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like the noonday. Then, if you sow seeds of light, then light will come and the darkness will be dispelled. It's an if-then statement, and it speaks in a very challenging way to us to ask ourselves, are we sowing seeds of light? All of these folks who are in need in one way or the other, whether it is the person who is lonely and needs a friend, or the person who is without adequate food or shelter or clothing, whatever the need is, someone who is grieving a loss, these are our brothers and sisters. And if they are in darkness, they are crying out for us to sow seeds of light. There is an old legend of a rabbi who, many generations ago, was asked his disciples, how can you tell when nighttime gives way to daytime? How can you tell when daytime has arrived? One of the disciples said, well, is it when you can see an animal and you can tell whether it's a sheep or a dog? The rabbi said, no. Another one said, is it that you can see a tree in the distance and tell whether it is a fig tree or a peach tree? Then is there enough light as day come? No, he said. No, he said, it's when you can see a man or a woman and recognize in that person the face of a brother or a sister. If you can't recognize the face of a brother or sister, it is still night. We are called to be those who sow light. And we're called to follow the light that shines brightly, the light of Christ that shows us that in the other is a brother or a sister. And then, if we sow seeds of light in all the ways that Isaiah outlines and more, then the darkness will turn to noonday. Then the darkness will be dispelled. It's amazing how many thousands, millions of ways that people are doing this. People right here in our own community, in our own church, who are every day in one way or the other helping to dispel darkness, bringing light in the darkness. Whether it's reaching out to someone who needs a meal, whether it is visiting, as I learned more about this last week at a luncheon, a Meals on Wheels luncheon, whether it's going and delivering a meal to a senior adult who otherwise would not have adequate nutrition and would not have someone checking up on them every day. That's light in the darkness. That's sowing seeds of light. Whether it's a teacher teaching a classroom, helping to dispel the darkness of ignorance. Or whether it's someone reaching out to the immigrant or the refugee in our midst who is fleeing persecution someplace else. Sowing seeds of light. It happens in millions of ways. And each one of us can do that. So when we pray this prayer, we're not really just passively praying that God will do something. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. But we're also reminding ourselves that this is a partnership deal, and we have to be instruments of peace. And we have to work at it. And God helps us in that endeavor. That we have to be those who sow light, and God helps us in that endeavor. Isaiah is so clear that it's not about the way we worship. It's not whether we hold the correct theology or right beliefs. It's not how many committees we have. It's not any of that. But it's what we do that really actually dispels darkness. That's our prayer, and that's our calling to be about that work. I want to close with a story that I think beautifully illustrates this and the power of it. The power of individuals coming together that can really make a difference. It goes back to 1989. It's East Germany. It's Leipzig. It's the Church of St. Nicholas. That church, in the summer, the spring and the summer and into the fall of that year, more and more were holding prayer vigils, prayer services, yearning for freedom, wanting that wall to come down, wanting their society to open up, wanting to experience the freedom to worship and to pray and to do and to associate and to work together and all the things they yearn for that we often take for granted. So they gathered in these prayer services, and sometimes after the police realized what they were doing in that particular church, the police would gather and would fill up almost all of the pews in the room so that the people couldn't get in, but they would get in anyway, and they lined the aisles, they lined the walls to be a part of that worship. It did no good to try to keep them out. One evening in October of that year, there was a prayer vigil. They brought candles. And as people saw what was going on, others joined, and others joined, and others joined, and pretty soon 70,000 people filled the streets and the plaza of that city, standing in prayer and singing with candles. Now they expected to be dispersed by the police. They expected to be met, perhaps even with violence. But that didn't happen. The chief of security, who was in his office overlooking the plaza, looked down at that throng of people with those candles, and he said this to his colleagues there. He said, "We prepared for everything. We anticipated everything except for candles." It was candles that won the day. It was light that dispelled the darkness. That's what it does. Lord, where there is darkness, let us sow light. Amen.